You're listening to the Everything Went Black podcast.
Hello, friends. Karl and I are back for another installment of Darkness Weaves. We are quickly reaching the end of this project. And this week, we kick off the Karl Edward Wagner Bran Make Morn pastiche novel, Legions from the Shadows. If you're listening to this podcast, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Also check out the other podcasts brought to you weekly by the horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. Kicking everything off every other Monday, we've got Brandon Legion's Horror Wolf 666. Up next on Tuesdays, Into the Necrosphere, the greatest extreme music podcast in the land, brought to you weekly by Jackie Smith. Wednesday, of course, is Everything Went Black, which you're listening to right now, as well as Iblis Manifestations. Thursday is Necro Thursday, where I return with Mike Scandato and Jeff Kashid for Necromaniacs, a horror podcast. We talk about a bunch of, actually, we're expanding beyond horror. So, talking about noir, neo-noir, adventure films, like that sort of thing. Thursday is also day one of Soul Knox, brought to you by Carl Hikara. Friday, Spitball Media comes at you, an irreverent pop culture podcast. Saturday is a day off. But Sunday, Karl returns with day two of Soul Knox. And as you know, if you're listening to this, Karl and I are involved in a collaboration called Darkness Weaves, which this episode is part of that project, where we're discussing the work of Karl Edward Wagner. We're also doing The Savage World of Robert E. Howard, where we're going to be getting into all of Robert E. Howard's incredible sword and sorcery, adventure, historical fiction, westerns, like all that sort of stuff, horror, everything. Thank you for listening. If you want to support the podcast via Patreon, please do so for as little as $1 a month. You can't even get a cup of coffee these days for $1, but you can support the show for $1. You get all of the bonus content for $5 a month. You get bonus content plus early access to the shows. And you know, I know lately things have been a little remiss on the bonus content. I'm in the middle of a big move here, so my time has been a little taken up by stuff. So probably midsummer we'll be getting back to generating more, special content for the Patreon. So we have returned for another episode of Darkness Weaves. And so this is a continuation of our flagship episode of The Savage World of Robert E. Howard. So basically, we're continuing where Worms of the Earth left off with the direct sequel called Legions from the Shadows, written by Karl Edward Wagner. And this is a direct sequel. pretty cool.
Yeah, the 'cause this novel is set so like in the Bran Make Morn chronology, you have Kings of the Night, which I think we'll cover after this.
Yeah, we'll
To
also mention that too in this episode.
Yeah, we'll mention it, and then because it crossover of Call, and then Worms of the Earth happens after that, and then it's this, and so this is a really good like transition point from Darkness Weaves into like a perfect transition point from Darkness Weaves right into Savage World.
Yeah. So Wagner published this book back in 1976 on Zebra Books, and it's got. I think you and I both have the same cover, the same artwork by Jeff Jones.
Yeah, so well, mine is the 1988 one with by K.W. Kelly.
Oh,
This is one I
okay,
have.
yeah, that one's cool. That's the
That's
same
the
publisher as Road to Kings. The same.
uh, This one is different. It's Bane.
Oh, okay,
So
gotcha.
this is different from the Road to Kings one because it's this is from the 80s when yeah this came out in 1988. Um, and it would have been in the late 80s. Wagner had like a deal with Bane where he was like editing some Howard paperbacks and then they republished some of his books as well.
Yeah, the version I have has it's funny because the cover, like when if your eyes first rest on this cover, the first thing you see is Conan, right? You see the name Conan.
Yeah. You're,
And
you're the one you have is the one that's the same one as the Road of Kings that I have, right? Like it's like
yeah,
the it's original pressing from 76 with that kind of gold band, yeah.
yep. And so you see Conan, then you see Robert E. Howard, right? And it's like, oh, Conan, another Conan novel. But then you see in smaller letters,
Yeah.
actual title of the book, Pages from the Shadows featuring Bran Make Morn and even smaller letters. And then in barely readable letters at the very, very bottom of the cover, you see by Karl Edward Wagner. It's like I think it's in a dark color, so it blends into the artwork. So you're thinking that you're buying a Conan novel written by Robert E. Howard.
Yeah. Yep, that's the kind of stuff that they'd pull on you.
I mean, it's a win-win situation, really. It's like, those kind of shenanigans work out in your favor because it's a great book.
Definitely, it's just funny. Like they'd be like, "Yeah, you're, you know, Conan," and then Robert E. Howard, and then real tiny. That's actually a Bran Make Morn novel.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Like
s-
the
so this is the second pastiche novel that we're
or-
covering. And so I would like to just do real quick, just talk about what I perceive as some of the differences in the writing style here too, because the Road of Kings, Conan
yeah,
pastiche
it's
that we
pretty
did,
different.
it's very much in the same style as a Karl Edward Wagner piece, I think. Like you can really see a lot of Wagner's personality in the way that he writes in that book. That's not the same in Legions from the Shadows.
Yeah,
I feel like he's really adopted the Robert E. Howard style in this book.
and and even more particular, the early 30s Robert E. Howard style of Worms of the Earth and Kings of the Night and stuff. Like which is slightly different from the Conan style. Because
Yeah.
like, when you read Worms of the Earth, it's a different style from Conan. You know what I mean? Like, um, and he's definitely adopts that with this. It's very differently written. I remember reading when I read this first time after reading Road of Kings, I was like real surprised to get in this and be like, oh, okay, this is like a very different writing style.
Yeah. So, maybe because it's a sequel, maybe, he's trying to maintain the same tone and atmosphere as the original Worms of the Earth. But it's, in my opinion, it's very flawless. Like you can read both of these as like one big narrative and without even registering that someone else wrote a different version, a different story here.
Yeah, I think that might be partly like with Road of Kings and Conan pastiche. There's a little bit more. There's a lot of room. Like, he's just telling a random Conan story that's pretty much unconnected from any of the other Conan pastiche novels that are coming out, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this, he's like closely tying it to the Bran Make Morn. And he's picking up like when we talk about the Worms of the Earth story, I mentioned at the end that Atlas says like, the worms of the earth remember, and that's he basically uses that as a writing prompt essentially.
Yeah. So for anyone who missed our first kickoff of Savage World of Robert E. Howard, Bran Make Morn exists in actual history. So he exists in the ancient Britain. And he's a Pict, which is I mean, even though Robert E. Howard and Wagner's version of the Picts differs greatly from the historical version of the Picts, there's still like an attempt to place this story roughly between AD 43 and 410, which is when Rome occupied Britain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and one thing that Wagner does do in this is he does update some of the historicism of it, and the chapter we get that's basically just a history lesson. From my research about the Picts and everything, it sounds like he like has tried to integrate Howard's Picts a bit more into actual history by drawing upon actual Pict history and
yeah,
a bit more. Because when Howard wrote that stuff, like no one really knew much about the Picts. There's a lot more people know a lot more about them now from like archaeology and stuff. So by the time, 40 years later, when Wagner's writing this, there was a bit more knowledge about it. So he seems to try to place it a bit more precisely in a historical account, I think.
yeah. No, definitely. I appreciated that, and a lot of that comes out in the prologue. So, just briefly, in Worms of the Earth, Bran Make Morn makes an alliance with Atla, and because Atla is like sort of the liaison between Bran and the Worms of the Earth, which are these degraded serpentine cave dwellers that are also they're servers of the Black Stone, which figures heavily into their whole pantheon of ritual and all that. And the reason why he calls on the worms of the earth to do his bidding is to get revenge on Titus Sula after he murders, or as a murder, he executes slash murders one of his men. And the sheer brutality and lack of justice prompted Bran to seek supernatural means to get his revenge. And the worms, Bran thought he actually just wanted to have Titus Sula delivered to him so he can kill him. But I urge you all to read that short story. Things don't quite turn out that way. So after Worms of the Earth, Bran is very reluctant to have anything to do with sorcery from that point on. Like, it was such a harrowing experience dealing with Atla, and the worms of the earth.
Yeah. And that comes up. And I just realized that I somehow only read up to chapter 7. I forgot I shouldn't read chapter 8, but
It's all right.
get there.
It's all good.
I was literally just looking at that and I was like, wait a minute, I miscounted what I was reading last night.
Yeah, we can adjust it. It's not a big deal.
Um, but yeah, so and it's coming to interesting things like he dedicates this to David A. Drake, who apparently helped with historical data. I've never read any David Drake's fantasy novels.
I haven't either.
Not really
No.
familiar with them at all. I know I know he writes a bunch of Roman historical fantasy stuff, and then he also has like his whole series called like Lord of the Isles or something like that, which is. But anyways, I
Yeah, I
didn't
haven't
even
read
know
any
that
of them.
Wagner and him are friends.
Yeah.
Um, I like that he has a Manuel Wellman quote here, and then a quote from Necronomicon.
Yeah.
Great holes secret I digged where earth's pores ought to suffice, and things have learnt to walk that ought to crawl. The So this story kicks off of a prologue, which takes place earlier in time, with Bran's what great grandfather or grandfather.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
his
it's
great Othna
grand.
MacMorn is
I think
his
it's his
great
grandfather.
grandfather. His great grandfather. And it was 80 years prior to the prologue happens 80 years earlier in the story.
Yes, and it's like the last great like gathering of all the Picts essentially, and they defeat the Ninth Legion essentially.
Yeah.
except for a little part of it, which
Yeah.
goes into like a cave, and they block them in the cave.
And this takes place around the construction of Hadrian's Wall, which was, a barrier that Rome erected to separate Caledonia between North and South. And that's a real thing. That's an actual historical, artifact there.
Yes, and also they s- part of the inspiration for the wall in Game of Thrones. So
Yeah. It separates the true North.
exactly, yeah, and I do think that maybe George Martin's more and a little bit inspired by the Bran stories for his portrayal of the wildlings, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, I mean, real distinction between the Picts of history and the Picts of Robert E. Howard's world is, you know, well, actually, there's two types of Picts. There's, the leaders, the chieftains, people like Bran who come from a different bloodline.
Well,
They,
I was gonna say I read this thing that they had part of the reason that they had where did my I took a picture of this. Um, I can't find it. Oh yeah, here it is. So part of what they say is that they had like when they got to this land, they had found some type of red bearded like giant race,
yeah,
and it gets mentioned later when they go to his keep Baldur. But it says that what happened was that what Wagner puts in there is that the kings like Bran Make Morn are like the pure blood basically.
yeah,
Somehow they've kept, and then but the rest of them bred with the remnants of that giant race, and that's part of what started leading them down this
yeah.
path of degeneration.
And they're like these kind of more like Neolithic, like almost cavemen, with these kind of, you know, hunched over, brutal, like, body types.
Yeah, this cover is real funny because they he literally makes them into like ape men, which I don't think they're supposed to be ape men
No, no.
necessarily, but
Yeah,
like they're just supposed to be maybe a little bit like I mean they're not even Neanderthal really because Neanderthals weren't like that either. Like I don't know, like Cro-Magnon or something. Like
yeah. Which is kind of weird, I think. And but that kind of trope, that like early 20th century concept of mixing races and causing degeneration was like kind of big in like the kind of fantasy world, the kind of weird tales, like old school, like sword and sorcery and adventure.
or extreme inbreeding, which was more common in Lovecraft stuff is usually extreme inbreeding. Like you think
Yeah,
about
like
what's the one where they go under the earth, burrowers?
well, even they touch on that even in the Dunwich Horror too, like
Yeah, Dunwich Horror. Yep, and I can't think of what the Lurking Fear.
the
That one
lurking
where they
fear when they're underground. Yeah,
where they turn into like the weird hairy creature things, like what's in the movie The Burrowers.
yeah. Oh, that's a great movie, by the way. It's in speaking of westerns, weird westerns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the best.
So that's kind of the lay of the land with the Picts. There's and what's interesting too about the way this is written is you have this like tragic sense throughout the whole um book. It's you get the sense that they're a descending race. Like their whole clan tribe, they're scattered. There's no real sort of they're not a kingdom. They're just like a series of villages, and Brand's hope is that he can bring the Pictdom into an actual nation, and that's his Baldur keep is like one of the only things in their culture that's like a permanent, city, quote unquote city.
Yeah, and it does match like that in Scotland at the time, like the Gaels came over from Ireland and settled in Western Scotland and kind of spread. Eventually, there were two parts. There was one part that was Pictum and one part that was the Gaelic area. And then eventually the Gaelic area kind of swallowed up the Pict area, and And in this, it's kind of like the pics are disappearing and kind of diminishing, and that's supposed to tie into the idea of them kind of becoming like the inspiration for like hobbits or something. You know what I mean? Like they're like disappearing into the hills and shit.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's kind of like their last gasp in this story. It's very tragic. That's one thing with Bran Make Morn is it's a very dark, tragic figure.
Yeah, exactly. And that whole concept of disappearing, races and tribes and all that's like a big topic with Wagner in general. I mean, if you remember, there was a story, the Kane story with the giant who was like the last of his, people,
Yeah.
and Wagner's always writing about, you know, cities that were once thriving metropolises and are now ruins. That's like a big, like the passage of time and the sort of ebb and flow of different civilizations is like a big. I feel like that's something that always fascinated Karl Edward Wagner.
Yeah, it's pretty much in almost every story in some way.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so Athna McMorn is Bran's grandfather, great grandfather, as I mentioned, and he's behind this campaign to defeat the Romans. And the survivors of Legio 9 are trapped basically behind in a cave, and he just walls them up and they leave, and just assuming that everyone dies, just starves to death or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not the case, of course.
Yeah. The they do not starve and die like they as we'll find out later. We don't really know exactly what's going on. Um but then the book itself starts off with um Bran McMorn having a nightmare essentially. And this also acts as a way to kind of for Wagner to introduce people to kind of like the cliff note of what happened.
Yeah, yeah, it's like a brief recap of what happened in Worms of the Earth. He has a nightmare, and apparently he's haunted by these dreams, which makes sense because the happenings in Worms of the Earth were pretty horrific. And he dreams of Atla, the were woman of of the Dagon's ring. you know
Yeah. And in his dream, she turns into like some like serpent like woman like licking him with a serpent tongue and all this stuff.
Wagner's description of her in this book is way more brutal than in Robert E. Howard's Worms of the Earth. Like she's way more repugnant in this novel.
Yeah, because she's kind of like she's a little bit attractive sounding in Howard, but in this she's like definitely not.
Yeah, she like smells and she's scaly and like, yeah, it's like she has an odor about her they talk about. Yeah, like in Robert E. Howard's world,
Yeah,
she's
like an odor of a serpent or something.
yeah, she's not described the same way. She's like a little like you might be intrigued by spending an evening with her.
Yeah, but definitely not this version.
Not this version, no. She's to be avoided at all costs. Um, yeah, so this is also we kind of get an overview of some of his other characters. Bran wakes up and his right hand man Grom is there, and Grom was he's like a sidekick essentially in pretty much all of his stories. He's kind of reflecting on how he wants nothing to do with sorcery anymore. He's like afraid of it, rightly so, and he's also understands that maybe once you get the the sort of stain of sorcery on you, you can't wash it off. It kind of follows you, which is exactly what happens to him.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's reckoning with the fact that he made a big mistake. He allowed his lust for revenge to cause to be to cause him to do something he shouldn't have done.
Yeah, and the reality too is he doubly made a mistake because now he's got Atla haunting his dreams, and also his revenge on Titus Sula was very unsatisfying. It was very anticlimactic because Sula was insane and he killed him basically out of mercy. So it wasn't even like a satisfactory revenge.
Yeah. And on top of that, the Romans have decided to send the punitive mission up into their area, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what we find out is going on is that he has Bran right now has got an army together to go fight some Romans. They're intending to kind of ambush them, I believe, and to turn to go and find the Roman camp and try to ambush it.
Yeah. And they've got about half the manpower as the Roman legion. So it's like still very, very dodgy. Like it's an uncertain future that these guys have. Because, it's the reality is like the Roman legion is, very disciplined and they're a true like war machine, like a fighting force. And though the Picts are courageous, they lack the swordsman skills and the tactical skills to really effectively go up against Rome without the element of surprise or sorcery to aid them.
Yeah, I mean they're it's like, but um, I think that they would prefer a clean death to the Romans, than anything else,
Yeah.
like.
So I think that even it's Gonar, who is kind of the priest, sort of shaman. That's he's part of Bran's entourage of people. He hints at the fact that Bran should seek other means because they first they talk about the Gales like calling them in to help, and all this other stuff. And he kind of hints at maybe going into the supernatural again. And Bran's like, no way. Like, I don't want anything to do with that. Look what happened the last time, I could still feel the shadow that's over me, and I don't want to deal with any of this stuff anymore.
Yeah. Here, can you pause for 1 second? I was trying to figure out something.
Yeah, sure.
I need to make a call for my work stuff. 1 second.
Yep, no problem. Okay. Yeah. So the Picts are rolling up on the Romans. They have an encampment, and it's raining out, and they're gearing up to attack them on the next morning. Um,
But
you
then,
know,
but then some scouts run back and say, the Romans aren't there anymore, right?
yeah, basically.
And we get a scene of fucking carnage.
Yeah.
Like all the bodies are missing heads. Um, like and and they find a giant pit in the center of it that reeks of like a serpent's lair,
Yep.
and they find a little severed arm. A little severed serpent arm.
Yeah. So, but there's definitely some back and forth about what actually happened. Like some people believe, because Bran is the one who finds like the tiny arm, right?
Yeah, and he
So
throws away so before anyone else sees it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so no one actually besides him, and I think he shares that with Gonar,
Yeah, I think
later on.
Gonar and Grom see it too, but no
Yeah.
one else. Yeah.
Uh, you know, some people think it was Cormac Nakanacht who might have raided these guys, which seems unlikely. So they're trying to reconcile this thing to make it a non-supernatural element. I mean, it just seems unlikely. The whole thing is very fishy. Yeah,
Well, yeah, and this like big pit in the middle of the camp has like drying gobbets of slime to edge the pit.
it's pretty obvious what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bran
So
thought of the mucoid trail of some unthinkably huge slug.
yeah. So yeah. So everyone's like, no Picts were killed. Which is a good thing.
Well, actually, I just re-looked at that. Apparently, they had a couple of scouts that were there the night before that got
Okay.
killed,
All
but
right.
yeah,
So, but yeah, some of the scouts got taken out. Um,
but that's
you know,
it. Like the army's fine. Yeah.
but so, mostly everyone's intact. No real casualties besides those, unfortunates that got, hit on the recon. Um, but so they're marching back to their land, and like I mentioned before, little by little, his men are peeling off to return back to their homes, return back to whatever, village they live at and their families and all that. And But Bran is unsettled by the whole thing because a lot of this is probably smacks of black magic sorcery to him, and he feels uneasy that yes, no, we had no casualties, but something very, very unusual happened, and I can't explain it.
And
So
he knows what happened.
yeah, he knows
He
deep
he's just
down what happened.
pretending like he doesn't. Yeah.
Yep.
And one thing about like the dreams that he was having the night before, like when the slaughter was happening, the ones of Atla, I get the feeling that Atla was sending him those dreams, you know?
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
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 And
She's
to like taunt him.
well, yeah, because that comes back later on. Soon, actually, it comes back.
I,
Um,
I yeah, so they're going to Bal Dor, which is built on the ruins of the gi red-bearded giants who lived there before. And this is cool because again, it's like this kind of ancient history thing we're talking about, like where he describes like the ancient foundations were of cyclopean construction and places incorporating stone slabs as large as menhirs. Um, so they just raised their walls on top of this ancient, you know, like kind of forgotten. Uh, they don't really know too much about who built this place, and it's just this name has been passed down, and of course the name is named after well, Ball. It's kind of like all this other stuff. Like there's like Dagon's teeth, and it's all these Middle Eastern like gods and stuff that everything's named after. Although I do believe in some of the Irish stories of like the what are they called, the Furbolgs or whatever, the original like kind of Titanic
oh yeah.
creatures.
Mhm. Yep.
They have someplace called something similar, Ball something rather.
I can't confirm or deny that.
Yeah, I
That's
can't think of it off the top of my head, but
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, years are the standing stones that you would see in like, Cornwall or something like that.
oh yeah, it's the Fomorians. Yeah, the Irish, had these myth stories that there were these ancient like Titanic like god like demigod things called the Fomorians who lived there, that the Danae, their gods eventually came and took over.
I wonder, not to get put on like, my tinfoil hat or anything like that, but like because there's giants in almost every one of these like ancient lores, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a race of giants that lived on the earth like thousands of years ago.
I wouldn't either, or like, Giant's relative, like, possibly it's kind of like in George Martin stuff with the Game of Thrones, his giants are like, 10 feet tall or something, but they're
Yeah,
still like bigger than everyone else. Um, I feel like this it's very possible that there were, and they have found some oddly large skeletons and stuff in the past, like here
yeah,
and there.
yeah,
But of course, that kind of stuff doesn't really, the one thing about the one dark side of the big part of the scientific community is that sometimes they do have a tendency to, until they can't, to ignore evidence that disproves their own theories. You know what I mean?
yeah. It's incredibly biased, definitely. So they'll try to explain certain things if there's a consensus one way or the other.
Yeah, until they can't really like can't argue it anymore for,
Yeah,
like stuff, and it's because there's all kinds of places that have like disproved some of the old theories about their like timeline for like how people spread across the world, like the kind of theory they have that they all is accepted as fact, has been kind of like shown to maybe not be 100% true because they're finding some of the oldest bones we found were in like Indonesia, you know what I mean?
right.
Like stuff that really and then it doesn't really account for things like the Neanderthals in like Europe who are like kind of like their own thing in Europe, how did that happen? It's like, so who knows, but I do think there's probably some real ancient race of something that lived in, England or something, back in the before the Ice Age or something.
Yeah, totally. So we meet Bran's sister, Morgaine, and very
This is the
strong.
only light of his life.
They're the only light of his life. Um, yeah, so they try to celebrate their quote unquote victory over the Romans. But everything's kind of like this half-heartedness to it. You know, everyone's kind of sullen and uneasy with the way things turned out against the Romans.
As they probably should be. I mean, it's not like they,
Yeah,
something bad happened, like, and I think everybody's just trying to pretend like it didn't happen, but you can't really. And I think that particularly the first time I read this, I really got this feeling of like the doom. Like there's just like doom settling over Bran, like that. You just have to wonder, is he actually going to be able to get his way out of this time?
no, something interesting about the character of Bran Make Morn. He seems to make some dire tactical mistakes. You know what I
Oh yeah.
mean? Yeah, like he's a very flawed character, which I find really cool about him. And that's like why Brand's like, I think he's a really interesting character, Robert E. Howard. I mean, all of Howard's other characters seem to have a little bit better judgment than him, you know.
Yeah, like Bran is a very decisive acting figure, but he's not necessarily decisive in the right way. Sometimes he decides to make decisions that are
Yeah.
and he goes full hog on it, but then it's just a fucking mess.
Yeah. So when the banquet's over, everyone kind of goes their own separate ways. Bran is in a fitful sleep, and then once again we have Atla interrupting his good REM sleep, calling out to
Yeah.
him.
And she's like calling out to him and he's, following her and her voice, she's calling him. He doesn't really know where he is, but he does like kind of understand that he walked through some like he's in he's walked from somewhere. He walks out of his outer door and falls into the night.
Yeah, it's an enchanted situation, because he thinks he's in like, Dagon's Moor and like all these different places and all that, but it turns out that he's not there at all.
No, and he's like seeing her um running before him and stuff like this, like a little flash of her, and he thinks it's all a dream until he finally hits his leg against a slab of broken stones, and the pain brings him out to realize that he's not dreaming. He's like literally out in this in a broken old tower and part of Bald Door that they never rebuilt.
Yeah, and this is where we see a pyramid of severed Roman heads.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so this is what became of the
It,
Romans.
yeah, he says there was a vague reptilian stench in the night, and now underscoring it, a heavier stink of death. And she's Bran, come to me, king of fools.
Yeah.
The like he launches to attack her, but yeah, then he finds and they also stole the eye sockets, the eyes out of the eye sockets. We'll
Oh,
come in,
we'll come back to that.
we'll come back to that at the end of this. Yeah,
Yeah, so there's these severed eyeless heads arranged in the form of a pyramid.
a giant pile, like a whole army.
Yeah, whole army, 2,000 at
Yeah,
least. Yeah.
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 And this is like when he like looks at this grisly pyramid and he's like, you know, they describes as bloodless faces set in the final grimaces of agony, others slack in death, skulls cloven and crushed. Just brutal. Some with necks neatly severed under of hacked and ragged stumps. Some with lower jaws shorn away. Just 2,000 butchered heads. It's crazy. Just
Yeah,
oozing blood
Wagner
everywhere.
has a good time describing all this stuff, and it's into all the lurid details of the different heads.
One thing that I was going to point out when we're talking about the differences between this and Road to Kings as well is that this is a horror story.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. It's a horror story. Yeah,
This is a horror fantasy that, where Road to Kings was a sword and sorcery story.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um,
Um,
yeah. So this is where we meet Quintus Claudius Nero, uh, a apparent what appears to be a Roman legionnaire. So he steps
yes.
out of the shadows And Atla claims that they have come as friends. So,
Yes. And this guy says that he is now the ninth is now Legio 9 Infernalis, King of Pictum, and we serve the Black Stone. And he seems to be like undead, maybe, you know?
well,
What do you think?
later on when Bran gets a really better like a better look at him, he notices that he's got these like tiny like teeth. So the reality is back 80 years ago when Legio 9 Hispania, they were traveling with women and children.
All right,
And
so they bred with the
there you go. They bred
yeah,
with the fucking reptilians.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
I haven't read this in like 3 years, so.
Yeah. The so he's the product of this like unholy union of worms of the earth and true Romans.
Yes. So he's much like Atla, he's like kind of semi-human. That makes sense now because he describes his words as being sibilant.
Yeah, sibilant, like the way like
Yeah.
a snake would speak if like a snake could speak English.
Yeah. So
Or
now
Latin in this case. Yeah.
yeah, he speaks Latin. Yeah, so it's like they become integrated in the worms of the earth. And
So
like yeah, it's
um
crazy.
Bran he shows off a little bit of his Latin, you know, by quoting and the Aeneid. He says, Timeo danao et dona forentis, which means literally means I fear Greeks bearing gifts. So it's like a little off on the land, but basically what he's saying is like, he's wary of people who are trying to become his friend, right away, quickly.
Yeah. It's it's definitely they're basically trying to convince him that what they gave him is a peace offering because they want to, you know, they want to unite with him to take down the Romans essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's the idea that Rome is like such a scourge on the land that everyone should be standing against them, and that we have common enemies, so that makes us allies.
Right. And it's kind of one of those things where in a lot of ways, due to his previous actions, essentially, Bran is getting drawn into this whether he likes it or not. You know what I mean? They're kind of
Yeah.
operating like we're just doing this and you're along for the ride with whether you like it or not, essentially, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because, the reality is like, once again I mentioned earlier how Bran is very doesn't always make the best decisions, doesn't execute proper judgment sometimes. And this is like a prime example of like reaping what you sow. Like he sought revenge in Worms of the Earth by any means. And now he's like completely connected to Atla and the worms and the Blackstone. And now this guy, Quintus Claudius Nero, this like half human, half reptilian legionnaire, basically.
Yeah. And what at this point, he also tries to attack Atla, but then gets taken down by clammy hands he can't really see. There seems to be like an almost like supernatural fog around the worms, like where people have a hard time actually seeing them, but he like punches at them. It's like they bring like a cloud of darkness. Like there's a spell in D&D that's called like I can't think of it. It's called darkness. Something like it'll envelop you in darkness. It's almost like what they seem to be in. But they start beating him, and he's like fierce light. He felt unseen face pulp beneath his blow. So he's like punching, and they're like dragging him down, and she's like, "Don't kill him." And she says like, he'll bargain with us yet." And next thing you know, Bran's knocked out, and he's like out cold, and then he's woken up by Grom here.
Yeah. So Grom wakes him up, and it turns out that, well, okay, this part's pretty brutal too.
Yep.
So,
So yeah, like they turns out like they put a spell, so all the guards felt were knocked out. And next thing you know, like he's saying this stuff, and all of a sudden, Bran thinks of the warning that Outlaw gave him, and he thinks of his sister, and they start. And then at the same moment, they hear a horrible scream,
yeah, they hear a scream.
and they
So,
run up to her room and find something pretty bad.
yeah, so in her chambers is like this body with its skin removed, and
Sewn back together again.
sewn back together again with all the eyes of the dead Roman legionnaires, like inside the body, it's just inside the skin rather.
Yeah, it's like they totally skinned this like handmaid and
Well, it turns out that initially he thinks it's Morgaine, but then he realizes, oh, it's not her, it's the handmaid. But Morgaine has been kidnapped.
she's been kidnapped. Yeah, this image, just imagine this image of like the skin like sewn together around like a bag thing of eyes. It actually makes you think of there's something like that in Bloodborne, that like game of uh there's like because it's all about all these eyes. There's like this eye creature that's got all these eyes like that, and it's like really disturbing. There's like a witch that has like this coat made of eyes. Yeah, but that's like a really fucked up scene, dude. I mean, can you
Yeah,
imagine that in a movie?
that'd be awesome, man. I would love to see that in a movie. Um, yeah, so Morgaine's missing. She's been kidnapped. We know that because Nero left a handwritten message on the body of the flayed woman, and basically saying we have your sister. She's safe for now. um, and meet them at Kestrel's Scour. And they'll tell him what the terms are to get his sister back. All right, so Bran is like full on back involved with sorcery and and magic and stuff like this, and the supernatural has found its way back into his life. And and it's not the first time where he's had to call upon supernatural means to defeat an enemy. And that was essentially what happened in Kings of the Night, where Kull of Atlantis was able to time travel to Bran's era and
Yeah,
help him in a battle.
yeah, because Gonar of Cole's era and Gonar of Bran's era somehow like well, we'll get into that when we cover that story, but he brings Cole in to lead a band of Vikings who had lost their war leader
Yeah,
and this like battle that happened. And so like, that was his first like real, thing with magic. And then Gonar's kind of like, the thing with Gonar is that as it describes in here is that he does like the other ritual, like the rituals, like the in reading the entrails and everything for the good of like the other Picts who, need this type of superstition. But Gonar can actually do real magic as well. And there's like a whole part earlier, like in chapter 3, I think it is called Men of the Heather, which gets into the whole Gonar goes through the whole history. It's basically like a way to lay out like the history of the Picts from Atlantis to now and all this kind of stuff, and include up the updating of his historical stuff that Wagner wanted to include in this.
yeah, that's pretty cool stuff, definitely. Yeah, so here we are. He's tangled up with dark magic, dark energy, you know, sorcery, all the things he wanted to avoid. He's meeting these like half humans at twilight, to kind of figure out some sort of treaty, maybe a treaty to get his sister back. So he's out there meeting with Atla and Nero. And once again, Bran does not execute the best judgment.
No. And a big part of it too is like Gonar was there for the massacre of the Legio Nine. Uh, and he doesn't know exactly what's been going on with all this, but what he is telling Bran is that you are losing, your tribes. Like you are now seen as like a cursed king who brought down the children of the night and are paying, and not even Baldur can keep them out, like
Yeah,
basically warning them, and that with Gonar thinks that they're doing this purposely to ruin him, essentially.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
Um,
also Bran is like being forced into this thing too because he doesn't have the pull with the rest of his people to actually assemble, a formidable army. So he kind of is like out of choices really here.
yeah. So he rides to this place to meet them, and essentially like they didn't bring Morgaine, and they get in this whole thing, and this is how he finds out about how like the people who survived mated with the children of the night, like, and he's like this like descendant of them,
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you got it when you get around to reading Monument by Adam Neville,
monumental.
Monumental. When you get to reading that, I like to, I'm interested to see what you might think of some of the stuff in there.
Yeah.
I got to
I've,
get
I've
him.
I've read like started reading it, like I've read like the first three or four chapters so far, but I haven't gotten too far in it yet.
It really picks up, man,
So
after the
looking forward to
first few
reading it.
chapters. Yeah, like there's a lot of characters. Like right, like straight away, there's like you're introduced to like a whole group of kayakers or whatever. But it gets real interesting. Um,
Yeah, it reminds me of the setup of the ritual quite a bit as well, but in like a different context.
yeah, and after finishing it, it definitely goes in a completely different direction, which is pretty cool. But anyway, back to our story. Um, yeah, so Bran decides to pull the old double cross on these guys, and he's got his men just beyond in just out in the shadows and tries to attack, but that doesn't go the right way for him either.
No, yeah, and this is after they've had this whole thing. Like he's trying to understand like what it is they want. They, the worms are all over the entire island, so they know what's going on. They're actually like know pretty much everything that's going on everywhere because they're listening.
Yeah,
So they know that Rome's planning on sending some huge army to come and, stamp out, you know, Ren and everything. And they're saying that they see that as more of a threat, essentially, that they want to, and of course, like, is this true? Is this not? We'll find out,
yeah,
we'll find out what they actually want.
yeah. Um,
But yeah, he makes a very big mistake. He brings out his like picks. He's like, we're gonna take you hostage, and then until you give me more gain. And this is a very bad idea, and just results in the death of all his men and him getting knocked out, essentially.
yeah. So at the end of the chapter, we find him basically disappearing into darkness and the unknown, and he's made another grave error in his fool's journey that he's on.
Yeah, Atla calls him a fool, and he really acts it some in this.
Yeah.
Uh, do you feel um, like I know in the not in Worms of the Earth, like Bran, made a mistake with the kings of the North, kings of the children of the Earth. I mean, but do you think that maybe Wagner's upping, his like kind of incompetence a little bit in this compared to the character in Worms of the Earth?
Yeah, I think so.
Do you think
Like,
it's maybe just to show him like unraveling, at this point in the story,
yeah, I mean, this is my first time reading this, so yeah, this is my first pass through this book, and that right away I noticed like that Bran is fucking up a lot, like pretty much from the beginning. And
Yeah.
so I mean, I'm eager to see what happens.
Yeah, I think this is a really good one. I like the horror in it, like I think I think that it's funny because I Road of Kings, I thought like when I read that I was thinking it was probably gonna be a bit more horror, like because all I'd really read from Wagner at that point was his horror stories.
Yeah,
And that one's more just straight, sword and sorcery. And then reading
adventure.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, this is more of what I expected for the Conan novel. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And Road of Kings has like a little bit more of a dark sense of humor to it. There are parts in there that, are kind of funny, which
Now
is
I think maybe after the first time I read Road of Kings is before I read any of the Kane stories. After reading that, after reading Kane, I definitely see the connection to a lot of the Kane stuff in that. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, it feels not in a bad way, but that Road of Kings has like Wagner's stamp on it, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
this one he's well submerged in creating like a Robert E. Howard style, and like you said, even more specific, like an early Robert E. Howard story.
Right. But he's definitely where you can tell that it's not Howard and it's definitely Wagner is like in the more gruesome aspects to it. Like,
And also the true historical the actual researched historical aspects of it too.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, Howard researched it, but he didn't really know much about the Picts back then, so he just kind of made up his own shit, like
Yeah.
um but yeah, I mean, I think it's a good start to the novel.
Oh
And
yeah, that's great.
the we'll be doing in two more parts. The what else have you been reading since our last one?
I finished up the second book of the New Sun and books of the New Sun, and it was good. I enjoyed that. I'll be moving forward on that. Um, Actually, that's about it. That and this Bran thing we just finished reading. Um, that's been working a lot, dude. And then also just like today, like I think I started working at like 6:30 in the morning and finished at like 5 p.m. So it's a
Yeah.
pretty long ass day. And then just like stuff with trying to get my house together and all these things. There's just been a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like I've talked to you on off air. I've gotten on like a Western kick because I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2, which Drew Goth had recommended me, and I've been meaning to play it anyways because I've been wanting, when I was a kid, I always wanted like some Western video game or something. But that game is like amazing.
Yeah.
But it's also inspired, so I've been watching some Westerns, and of course we're going to be covering High Plains Drifter, hopefully next week, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great movie, man.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's looking forward to it.
So I got inspired to pick up the Robert E. Howard Foundation collection of all his westerns, which I got yesterday. I haven't really had a chance. I read the introduction, started reading the first story, and but that book is awesome. It's like 600 something pages. Has all of his rigor western stories, has all his weird western stories, has a lot of his juvenilia and like fragments, and then also a few like nonfiction stories he wrote, or nonfiction articles he wrote about the West for like local magazines or something. And really, really cool, including some photos he took. Like there's like a history of some like ghost town there, and he took pictures of it for this like local like newspaper or whatever. And it's all replicated in it. It's cool. So
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I gotta pick that up, definitely.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and today I went to the used bookstore by my house. They have like a Western section. Of course, like nobody wants Westerns nowadays, so they're all like a buck a piece. So I walked out with like 20 books or something,
Oh,
20
that's
books for
killer, dude.
$20 or some shit. And but I was trying to find. I'm kind of like interested in the idea of like a lot of the short stories. So I found a couple Max Brand short story collections, as well as a number of his novels, and then some Louis L'Amour short story collections. I've never read any of his short stories. I haven't really read much Louis L'Amour, to be honest, so it's kind of like
Yeah, I mean,
I just kind of
I haven't read much westerns to be honest. Like I've seen a lot of like western films, but I haven't seen a whole lot. I haven't read a whole lot of westerns.
yeah, I'm a big fan of Max Brand, who was writing around the same time as Howard and Lovecraft, and was like the king of the pulps. That's what they called him. Like he wrote hundreds and hundreds of stories, like under all these different pen names. I have a collection of his detective fiction that I found like when I was on vacation last year. Um, he's a really good author, and so I like a lot of his stuff. But there's some stuff like Zane Grey is like real famous.
Yeah, I heard that name.
Like Riders, the Purple Sage. For example, I got that. I tried reading that one as a kid, but it was maybe a little above my head as a kid, like because it's very old, like 1920s or something. So I'm gonna try to read that at some point. Um, but like William Moore, read some William Moore when I was a kid, but I haven't read that much as an adult of his stuff. So I don't even really know where to start with his stuff. So I just got some of his short story collections, really.
Yeah, it's probably the best
Yeah,
place. You just grab a
yeah,
bunch of short stories, definitely. Yeah, I know that Matheson, like we were talking about Matheson's stories, and I have one of his collections that has a bunch of weird westerns in it. Um, those are really the only westerns I've read, and then there's also that S. Scott Zoller
right.
books,
And have you?
those aren't like written in the pulp era. They're written just in the modern era.
Right. Have you read Blood Meridian?
Oh well, yeah, okay, yeah. Well, now we're talking about Cormac. Yeah, I read Blood. It's all right. So I've read McCarthy's westerns, definitely.
Right. Yeah. Blood.
Yeah, Cities of
Um.
the Plain. All the Pretty Horses, Blood Meridian. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely want to get into F. Scott Zoller stuff. I have two of his books in my shopping cart on Amazon. I'm going to pick up. Um.
Yeah.
The nice thing about the pulp things, you can go to like used bookstore and find a bunch of them cheap. Or on eBay, I was able to find like a huge lot of like 40 something for like $1 a piece or something. Like, like you can find like a lot of these old pulp novels, and they're fun. It's like Michael Vaughn does on his June on the Range, where he just pulls out some of his old pulp. They're like 100 pages. You can read them like literally in like a sitting. Like
I really like that guy's YouTube channel. Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
he's fun.
it's actually through. I was watching his one about that he just put out a few days ago about Robert E. Howard's westerns. Did you watch that? And
Yep.
he talks about the collection that I got, but then he also talked about I guess they did two Breckenridge Elkins collections, which I then found. I haven't bought them. I'll buy them eventually, but which was his like mountain man, tall tale character, I guess, which he wrote a lot of that for some reason. And I don't really know much about that character. There's, I Yeah, I'm definitely a big fan of Westerns. I've read a lot of Western stuff over the years, like mostly the old pulp, like stuff is that you just find them for, $1 a piece, like
Yeah, Howard. He's writing for a living. So he's cranking out all kinds of stories. Boxing stories, like all sorts of stuff.
yeah, it's definitely cool to get into some of the stuff that you haven't read before. And I'm really looking forward to reading the Western stuff because I didn't, I've always read that he like wanted to kind of, if he had lived, he probably intended to mostly write Western stories after. And I really do think that if he had lived, he had gone down that path. I mean, he probably would have been like a Julio Moore or Max Brand or something in the 50s, like publishing a million paperbacks
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
of like Western paperbacks. I mean, he would have made a lot of money doing that, in the 50s and 60s. Um, like, and I think it would have been fun. I mean, I'm looking forward to reading all these stories. Um, I've read his weird westerns because I've read like the Horror from the Mound and some of his other weird western
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. The horror stories I've read, like that's in a collection that's like Robert E. Howard's horror stories, or it's like a white
Yeah,
volume.
The Del Rey one. Yeah,
Yeah, I've read that. So yeah, I don't, but yeah, I haven't read a whole lot of westerns, I should say.
yeah. The I definitely if you're ever in the market for an epic, definitely read Lonesome Dove because that's a great novel, as I was mentioning to you a few days ago.
Yeah, nah, totally, dude. That's like definitely something I want to check out. Like
Yeah,
yeah, I love Western movies, like the good ones, like the Sam Peckinpah stories, like things like that. So yeah, I'd probably enjoy it.
yeah. I mean, obviously I grew up in the West, like, and my parents were huge Western fans and grew up like watching westerns my whole life and living it here in the West, going to old West like museums and shit. And so it's a big part of like of my makeup that I occasionally get in the mode where I'm like, I'm gonna read this shit, like, or watch the movies. And I like a lot of different kinds, but that's stuff that we can get into more when we're talking about High Plains Drifter as well. But yeah, I do recommend picking up this collection. My intention is for uh Savage World, Robert E. Howard. I mean, obviously we're going to be doing Karl and Conan for like 2 years because I
Oh
counted.
yeah, yeah,
There's 22 Conan stories or 21 Conan stories. There's only about three or four actual published Karl stories that like were published in his lifetime. Um, and at least one of those Conan ones is the novel Conan, Hour of the Dragon, which will probably be like 2 episodes.
yeah, probably multiple
Um,
episodes.
so it's gonna be like 2 years. In the meantime, in those 2 years, I intend to get all of the Robert E. Howard Foundation things now that they have paperbacks, because they made unlimited paperbacks of all of them. That's what I got for the Western one. So I want to get, you know, just all of them, you know. I just want to have a full collection of all the Howard stuff that I've always wanted to read that you couldn't, it's hard to find before.
Yeah, they're doing a great job of keeping that stuff in print for sure.
The Western stuff I came to realize watching Michael Vaughn is that there's a Bane paperback in the 80s called like The Last Ride or something like that. And then there's one like in the 70s and I think Michael Vaughn was talking about how one of the collections like talks about like makes it sound like it's almost like a weird like a a totally different genre on the back.
Oh wow. Yeah, oh, yeah, I
To try
remember
to
seeing, yep, I remember
yeah.
that episode. Yeah.
It's
That's
like if you read
interesting.
the back of that, you wouldn't even know you're buying a book of Westerns. That's the one from the 70s. Um, but I've never in my entire life seen that book in like a store. You know what I mean? I found them on eBay, but I was like, I don't know. You know, eventually I might order for the collection, but so it that's the thing is like I never found those Howard Westerns. I always heard about him, but I never thought to look and see if they put out a paperback of them or something. You know,
Yeah, no, totally.
like an out of print paperback for 20, almost 40 years now. You know. I just don't know why Del Rey didn't put out a paperback collection of his westerns in the 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they were just focusing more on the more well-known stuff. I don't know. Thinking maybe in terms of sales. It's like the Robert E. Howard Foundation is literally more of like an archive just to keep all that stuff out in print.
Yeah, and that's what's nice. I mean, Del Rey did put out that Sword Woman one we both got. That
Yeah, but that's
that
like
was
adjacent. That's adjacent to like if you're buying Kull and Solomon Kane and Conan, you're likely to buy that, you know.
where yeah, you're
Um,
probably less likely to buy. Um,
yeah, like a book of westerns. That's I mean, I would, but like
yeah,
your average sword and sorcery fan might, forego that.
the only one thing of his stories he wrote that I really have no real interest in reading is the boxing stories because I just don't really understand. I guess I don't really understand the appeal of reading a story about boxing.
Yeah, I never read any of those. I mean, I'm definitely curious though. You
Yeah, I'm
know,
kind of curious to see like what they made. I would probably buy that collection for the collection to have all the Howard be a completionist for Howard. I I am curious like how do you make a story out of that? And that was a very popular genre. There's pulps that are entirely just boxing stories, like
yeah, I don't know, man. Maybe it's about I don't know who knows. You know what else is like the one we haven't talked about is Almeric, his Sword and Planet story.
yeah, that's definitely one we'll be covering at
Oh
some
yeah,
point.
yeah, the
And
novel. Yeah,
you
that's
sent
like
me that. You sent me that. And then I found a paperback a little bit later, like an old paperback of it from the
yeah,
70s.
and that's like his response to Edgar Rice Burroughs, John Carter stories.
Yeah, it's definitely reminds you of. I kind of like it better than John Carter a little bit personally. Like,
Well,
I
yeah,
think
I mean,
because it's a bit more savage.
I just like Howard's work better. But that was like a big, that was like a trope. A lot of genres of dudes being, Earth men being transported to other planets and living out their better life there.
Yeah, and like becoming like that one I like though is because he like was somebody who isn't able to function very well in this world. Like, but as soon as he goes to this savage world, like he kind of like finds his home in a way. He finds like he
Yeah, he
becomes like
thrives. He
he
thrives in that
thrives.
setting. Yeah,
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 I like that. Yeah, Edgar Rice Burroughs is somebody that I have a ton of Tarzan stuff. Like I read a lot when I was a kid of like Tarzan, but I have like zero interest reading Tarzan as an adult because I just don't give a I can't imagine reading that now and not being like I don't know, this whole jungle story thing isn't all that interesting to me.
yeah. I never
It,
read him. Yeah.
um I did buy well, I got for free because I had like Kindle points where because when you buy stuff you'll get like
Yep.
99 cents on Kindle or whatever.
hmm
I got the collection of all the Burroughs Westerns that I didn't even know he wrote. So
I feel like everyone wrote westerns in that era. That was like a genre that was like very popular. People just, for to make money, I think just wrote in that genre.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of cool though with was that they would write in the genre, but then they'd all put their stamp on it in some way,
Yeah,
you know.
no, definitely.
So that's cool. I do want to get that Pellucidar volume that you got that has like the reprints of all the old ones with the illustrations and everything.
Yeah, that was a really cool book.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
But yeah,
All right, man, we're moving on. This is like I'm excited to finally get a chance to read this one. Like I said, this is my first time through. Looking forward to eager to see what happens to our character Bran.
yeah, that's this is a good one. And the next episode we'll be doing, I believe I said what was it, 8 to or no, 9, chapter 9
Yeah,
to what was the one? I can't quite remember. I think it was like tw 12 or something like that. I don't remember.
yeah.
It's like another third. I broke it up in thirds, so it's like 8, whatever, 8. So what's 8? 6, chapter 16 or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So 9 to like 16. That's what it is. Because then
Right
it
on.
splits it up so that we like 8 chapters each episode. And then we'll be full on in the Savage World of Robert E. Howard.
Also looking forward to that. All right,
And
everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time around.
oh yeah.